Hey guys, Zach here. Let's talk fun Windows updates and how they can basically break your entire machine. Um, so some background. I've been into tech ever since I was a kid. Basically, the first time I had my hands on a computer. Now this dates me a little bit, literally to people that are younger in my audience, but then also some people that are older in my audience. So trust me, I'm not an ageist. Either way, I don't care if you're young or old listening to this. If you're listening to this and find some entertainment out of it, great. So I'm going to hop back into the 90s and talk about, my compact Presario PC, desktop PC. No, I'm not. I'm not going to actually talk about it, but legitimately, this was our first, family computer. I think Compaq then took the Presario name and, they made it into something else, right? They made it into laptops and stuff. But, mine was dealing with it in the context of those old bubbly yellowish white plastic machines that we, came to know Compaq as well as Dell for in that era. So, I've been accustomed to not only, I've destroyed machines essentially, like I've installed viruses. If anybody was around in that same time and grew up in that same time, LimeWire was huge and huge for my generation with getting iPods and other MP3 players. So LimeWire and messing up our computers was almost, I don't want to say it was a rite of passage, but, I got in trouble for messing up at least one of our home computers at one point. Now it was well-intentioned. I intended to literally fix something. I intended, back when there were actual antivirus software suites that weren't viruses themselves, very rare nowadays, if existed at all, I don't think. Some claim to be, but ultimately do more harm than good on most people's computers. But anyways, I've messed up my fair share of things, but I've also learned from my mistakes. I back up things when I can. I try to keep offsite backups of certain things, things that you can't lose. And then, I don't really put out what services I use either. For the most part, I think I'm actually pretty okay. And for being on the internet, as quote unquote, like a personality at all, you potentially are definitely more of a security target. I've had bank stuff and I've had other access that people have attempted at times in my life. And it is what it is. And some of those are just not, they obviously don't have any idea who I am, or they're not targeting me specifically. So that's the thing too. There's a lot of people that go, oh, I was targeted by this. A lot of times it's not you specifically. It's you're just on a list somewhere. Anyways, this is me rambling again, talking about old tech for no reason other than, like I said, to kind of set this up, which is that, I've also done, troubleshooting and done, I'm not some, I don't have, a degree in anything that I basically do. But I have a lot of knowledge, and then Google is your best friend usually for a lot of things. And if you can Google well, if you can find actual results in, place forums like Reddit, and you can go other places and kind of find, answers to your problems. That's also a very useful skill in diagnostic of your own computers and your own home network and all that stuff. So it's something that I still try to keep as, in the forefront of my mind as possible while not having to actually do it, if that makes sense. I'm not actively working a job where I'm doing any, tech support or any of that type of stuff, but I understand the concepts of it. I'm still, the family computer guy because I've said computer once in my life, right? That's, I think, again, the thing that if you grew up in the 90s, if you said computer, everybody's like, oh, well, now they can literally, this guy can build a server that'll get us to the moon. It's like, no, I'm not that. I can figure out a lot of stuff, but it's mostly, like I said, it's because I'm able to Google well. So anyways, this goes to, man, I think technically I shut down my computer on Thursday, and I think I maybe it was Friday where I saw issues with performance, but either way, what had happened was Windows updates, and it does its the latest cumulative update for my Windows 10 build, which I guess this is me putting out, information that is very specific. But if you're not aware that most people that do content creation, definitely with gaming related content, they're running Windows. Wow. Shocker. But yeah, Windows 10 and then whatever the latest, branch of Windows 10 that I'm on, I did a cumulative update as well as a security update. And my God, if I didn't come onto my computer and was like, this feels like it is from Windows, it is Windows 95. It just felt so unbelievably chuggy. Chuggy is the best way I could say, chuggy or laggy. Doing tasks, it loading up, it booting up. My main drive is an NVMe. I've had issues-ish in the past with SSDs, but these are all my SSDs are Samsung. I know that Samsung has its own problems, and specifically own problems with NVMEs and SSDs, but they're still probably one of the strongest brands out there. It's not a knockoff. My point being too, it's not a knockoff or a really, really cheap NVMe or SSD as my main drive, my boot drive. And I only basically put Resolve on there, the apps that launch, but the actual save files or the actual full game files and all that stuff I have on another SSD that's huge. So I feel like I have a decent setup. I'm not writing anything really honestly other than I know my operating system, but to the main drive that anything mission critical is, either on another drive or backed up twice kind of stuff. So I've learned from my mistakes in the past. I don't have, insane storage. I would like to have actually better storage. But then, stuff comes out like about QNAP and ransomware and stuff. And that gives me even more anxiety. My computer it in itself is on the internet, right? But if I follow certain steps, keeping it protected, then ultimately the data that is connected to that computer is also mostly protected too. And I feel that's, if anything, decent security when it comes to, your home network and the data that's connected to your computer and all that. Think about that actually too. If for anything, right? Do you want this stuff to go out on the internet? Well, is it on your computer? Then it's on the internet. In a way, I'm not trying to get, super conspiratorial here or anything. But anyways, it was just so unbelievably slow. It felt like hard drive and like old, very slow hard drive. If you're out there and you know anything about tech, and I know I'm talking a lot about tech right now, but it felt very slow hard drive. And I couldn't discern anything in Task Manager or in what's the thing that's under Task Manager that you can go to, the Process Manager. Some of these tools in Windows are also really old. Task Manager has had multiple, facelifts over the years, but ultimately, in a lot of ways, it's still the same. It's a lot better though, and you can kind of figure out. And so I was having system interrupts, which are where your machine is basically waiting on something. So the easiest way I can kind of, at least from my knowledge of this, is that, hey, there's, your hardware and software is communicating on your hardware, right? Your hardware is everything in your computer, the motherboard, the CPU, the RAM. I'm talking about major components here, but something in that process is waiting. So my question then is, from this Windows update, what could have broke? Well, I woke up, I come onto I get onto my machine, and the first thing that's broken is sound. I cannot stress this enough. I don't know if this is and I know it's actually not a GoXLR thing because I dealt with this all the time with other audio interfaces that I've dealt with in the past. This is very much so a Windows thing and very much so a Windows audio thing. I come in and then it's all my audio stuff is broken. Okay, that could have to do with, my graphics card, can send audio over the HDMI to a monitor that has speakers, which I think technically all my monitors do have speakers, but besides the point, it could use the NVIDIA RTX HDMI sound. So sometimes it goes to that, even though my default is obviously set all over my GoXLR. All of the ins and outs are set to the GoXLR as defaults. Default communication device, default audio devices, all of that stuff. So you have to reset that. That's at this point not even technically a problem, but I'm even noticing when I'm doing that, right? And I'm in the Windows sound that it is just so slow. And I'm trying to figure out what has happened. You know, did I get infected? Did my computer get infected with a virus? When you get type of performance too, and a lot of these viruses and malware hides itself almost immediately. Sometimes it's always hidden kind of thing. Like it will actually affect your system performance, but you'll never see it in Task Manager, all that stuff. But there's also some that basically are, you know, minors that will ramp down or stop or hide themselves to the task manager, sorry. And then they'll come back basically. And, you know, so sometimes even like your system performance will like get better in Task Manager and stuff. I had none of that. Everything was slow. Every browser, you know, Steam, everything was just, you know, it was a couple seconds and a couple seconds lag. Okay, so then you go down this road, and I'm gonna just lay it out there. You know, if you have Windows 10 and you ever get an update on your system, some of these steps you can probably follow too to see if, you know, it's just a Windows problem, if Windows broke something in the chain. I know that what, you know, I and other creators do with their computers is a little bit not only more demanding. You know, when we render our machines, a lot of times go into, you know, 100% CPU load. If you utilize GPU encoding, you're also utilizing your graphics card. So there's, you know, a lot of power drawn when you're, you know, doing a full encode in a lot of times. So that's one thing too that people can think immediately, potentially like power supply or anything. And we had a power outage the other day. I'm in a battery backup, so I wasn't concerned. I didn't think of anything like that. This is also not, I want to say, leading to anything with the power supply. But you know, power supply is also something that's the one that I got in my machine. I didn't cheap out on. Don't cheap out on power supplies. They protect and, you know, ensure that your computer gets clean power, but and then also a battery backup that is from a reputable brand also ensures that your PC isn't only protected, a la surge surge protection, but also that it gets clean power too, because it can avoid, you know, it can help through, you know, brownouts, blackouts, all that stuff. And it can, you know, get rid of dirty power basically, because it can use the power that's on board. Anyways, I'm going off on another tangent and I do apologize. I was actually trying to make this a somewhat quick thing that was for supporters, but it's turned into this. Anyways, so you go through a couple steps. You basically go through and look at like Windows Update, what Windows updates actually came through. Did both of them actually succeed? Did they both, you know, because you'll do that thing where you do shutdown and update or restart an update. I'm a person that sometimes hibernates my machine. There's a lot of things that's probably honestly bad for what I do. GeForce Experience, it does not like capturing some things when you come back from sleep or hibernate. And, you know, hey, to each their own. I like to hibernate my machine or sleep my machine because then I don't have to worry about coming back to it and having a Windows update and breaking my workflow for a day when I want to just hop on my machine and do things, as opposed to spend almost an entire weekend diagnosing them and only today fixing. So, you know, I think that's me mentally going, I'll take I think there's, you know, a hibernation file that's similar to like how the page file also works on your computer, which a page file is kind of like another place for things that would also be in RAM, is the best way to say it, I guess. Everybody's going to tear me apart. If you're an actual IT person, I do apologize. I'm trying to convey these things, but also I'm trying to give some detail behind them, because I know there are some people that are technically inclined that would be more interested to listen to this kind of stuff, but also don't necessarily know everything I'm talking about. I don't necessarily, you know, full on know anything I'm talking about either. Don't listen to this and do something to your machine, or, you know, this is not legal advice. Sorry, this is not technical advice. So anyways, I just completely lost my train of thought there by going down that rabbit hole. Yeah, what was I'm sorry. These are not planned, by the way, obviously. This is me just rambling on. Okay, so Windows Update. Windows is updated. I was talking about hibernation files and page files. And I don't even need to go down that rabbit hole yet. So I boot into my machine. I have to go through all this stuff. And I also know, when it was booting, I had you have Windows and it loads and it does that little dance with the balls. That's a statement. That even was like a slow animation and then stuff to boot up. And, I have some stuff boot up. I try to make my boot up sequence not too overly loaded up with stuff, but there's some things like Go XLR software and some other things that I have to have running. That's the whole point. And I don't want to boot them up when I need them. I like having, my Stream Deck running or other stuff. So I don't want to have to go through that. And ultimately, that can be an initial period where, Windows is doing stuff in the background after an update. And I understand that. So I'm not even that hard pressed to be okay, my performance is awful and broken. But then, it doesn't get better after only a minute or two. It doesn't get better. And by that time, stuff should have indexing or some stuff should have gotten better. But opening Explorer, opening anything else, it's just all slow. It's all chunky. The windows are drawing poorly. And I'm just this could be in NVIDIA drivers. Like I said, audio got reset, but that can be something with the NVIDIA driver breaking, but it was actually by default going to the NVIDIA driver. So I kind of ruled out the NVIDIA driver being a thing that was causing this ultimate lag. And by going to the task manager, looking at tasks and all that stuff, figuring out basically going through this and figuring out that this is not like a virus or malware. At least ultimately the thing that's causing these problems is not this. And, going through Windows Defender and running a full scan. I'm doing a lot of these time involved processes, even on fast drives, even on SSDs and even with, a good machine, but also it's because I think, my CPU is ultimately the thing having the problem is my CPU, I think. So, the first thing I did was go back to my BIOS and make sure that I don't have any overclocking profiles set other than the RAM. I even considered turning that off, but I wanted to keep it on. I have you have to change that profile so you can basically have your clock speeds of your RAM be the as advertised clock speeds. It's overclocking, but it's not, honestly, in my opinion. And then, making sure that my BIOS doesn't have any overclocks itself or is using any tuning software or anything. I made sure everything was turned off in that. Nothing enabled that would otherwise be enabled really by default. I didn't want to reset my BIOS completely because I don't want, that was BIOS and updating it or resetting it is kind of my final thing because BIOS updates stress me out personally. I know it's the dumb thing, but it's one of those things where anytime you have a device that's don't shut me off, and I'm just oh God, what if I do have a power outage now and then my BIOS is wiped? Kind of thing, and then I have to go through the process of giving it a USB drive in the one spot that can restore my BIOS. I don't want to go down that path. So everything, and I'm taking obviously hours and hours of troubleshooting, and kind of trying to condense this into something that's not 20 minutes, but we're quickly getting there. So I'm going through a lot of different stuff. I got the Samsung Magician up for my Samsung drives. I'm running all of those different tests, including Smart. My NVMe has the latest drivers, but one of my other SSDs that's Samsung as well did not have the latest firmware drivers, and it kept bugging me about updating not only the Samsung Magician software, but also the firmware drivers. I did all of that. Even ensured whatever the Microsoft Intel NVMe driver or whatever that's there, it was up to date, or it's as up to date as it says it is. Even went to Samsung, make sure that driver was downloaded and installed, the Samsung NVMe driver, which supposedly if you don't have installed for some people and some, use cases on some motherboards, all that blah, 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 you won't get the advertised speed. I actually do think I ultimately made my NVMe faster, inevitable or coincidentally by installing something in this process, but great for that. But yeah, everything. And even in there, so my write speeds and my read speeds were kind of slow, and people don't think about this. But your CPU is ultimately the thing doing all of that moving. Data doesn't just move around in your hard drives. It doesn't just, it needs the CPU. It needs a lot of other stuff in that process too, mind you. But I'm ultimately just saying it needs the CPU, and the CPU does a lot of heavy lifting. And that's even why, your Steam downloads on a computer as a whole But then specifically ones like Steam, which are not only, they're compressed in a lot of ways. And then so when you're downloading, they're taking this big compressed file. Your CPU is doing the lifting of downloading it, talking to your network, either the Wi-Fi or your Ethernet port. So it's pulling that data in, but then it's also in that process unzipping it essentially, and then putting it into places on your hard drives. And if you have a slow hard drive too, that process is ultimately slowed down as well in that process. So I'm basically going through and, I'm essentially I'm doing some cleaning that I probably should do on my computer every year or so. Yeah, I should look more often as what all is starting up, and then also look at these drives and what they have stored on them and all that stuff. What's just running in the background as background processes. Definitely if you're gaming and recording the gaming, it's a system intensive process. So everything, that's kind of running in the background that's not necessarily needed, it's good to actually go through that process and kind of look at that stuff every once in a while and make sure you don't have just junk running in the background. But anyways, after going through so many different Reddit threads and, specifically people talking about the newest update and what it's broke for them, because it's very common, there's a big security fix in this latest update. I would rather not have that installed on my computer. But at the same time, I went through and rolled back both of those updates, and had nothing good came of it. My computer was still exactly the same. So I'm like, what changed in this update that broke something? But rolling back, well, you also have an update that it's on top of technically from even a couple months ago. You can't roll back ultimately updates, definitely if they have also other patches on them in Windows. So I can't go back, 3 updates just because I know at least that base over there probably works or probably doesn't have problems. There was supposedly an update 3 or 4 months ago for some people that just made their machines utterly slow. And people, I don't know, other than Windows even saying in the logs that like this fixes this. It was like a patch, right? And it came out like 2 days later and it was like, this fixes the non-responsive computers and Explorer and all that stuff from a couple days ago. It's like, what? So ultimately I'm like struggling to find a solution. Man bangs head on desk type stuff. I walked away numerous times. I left my computer and just went, I can't, I don't know what this is. I'm going to have to just basically probably at this point, probably have to reinstall Windows. And I went through also in this process, all the different, Windows utilities. Some of them are also like kind of out of date, but like the different disk checks and the system checks and all that stuff, and running them online and even offline, AKA when you're like, online is when the operating system is running. Offline is in a minimal state, like where you reboot the computer in safe mode and it's not actually running Windows and you're just kind of at a command line. So like I did all of those things to kind of like figure out, and then also updated a bunch of drivers that Windows claimed were updated, but they weren't. That classic thing where the Windows update driver log and the things that are even claimed as optional updates, the optional updates are older. So I don't know, Windows update, long storied past of Windows update not being great at certain things, but it's gotten a lot better. And I thought it was better with drivers. I thought I had updated drivers for everything. Ultimately not my issue again. If something didn't have an up-to-date driver, it does now. And none of those things ultimately solved my issue either. So this is basically becoming a podcast, and I do apologize if somebody was here just to listen to a lighthearted Zach joke about some stuff, and he's just talking about tech for 30 minutes and rambling on. But that's what I'm doing. So yeah, I'm knocking my, and I've got hardware monitor up that's showing slightly different numbers than Task Manager, which is not unusual in terms of like CPU usage and stuff, but like doing anything is obviously there's like I'm ultimately, I keep going, this is obviously something to do with my CPU, but my cooler's fine from what I can gather. The system's not overheating. None of the temps and any of the things that manage temps and look at temps are bad. Power looks good to everything, at least again, from what you can discern from those built-in programs. I don't have anything that directly talks to my power supply. Newer power supplies sometimes have that kind of stuff, but that's not all too common. But, and then I made sure I even disabled like the AI suite, which I think is Asus's thing that boots up. I disabled like kind of all of these other things that kind of may or may not mess with either clock speeds or overclocking, or I don't know, things that I think maybe could potentially interact with each other. And again, none of that's the thing. So ultimately too, you got to do these things, and you want to, in a perfect world, you want to only do one thing at a time, so you actually know what fix the thing, which ultimately is a difficult thing to do and sometimes when you're trying to throw everything at it. And you don't want to also change all of these things and then, actually have this be a thing that you actually have to use. So like I use Precision X with my EVGA graphics card, because I have a fan clock on that ensures that the fans on the card don't stop. And somebody could argue that that's bad for the fans, ultimate lifetime of the fans or whatever, but I have it so that it doesn't do that thing where it basically clicks, because the fans, when they stop and then they speed up, and then also they'll go through that thing too where they'll stop and go and stop and go and stop and go. And I'd rather just have them running at a low level, keeping not only the card cool even in a reduced use state, but also in terms of just air efficiency in the case and all that stuff. So nothing in there too, nothing in the graphics card. And then I go back and I think to myself, have I ever used anything on the system level in terms of like overclocking or anything? I had this realization that I went back into the Intel Extreme Tuning Utility. What a cool thing. Well, so I thought, and I could be misremembering my own my own story or my own events in life. But I thought I used the Extreme Tuning Utility, but I only used it to essentially look at it. I only used it to essentially benchmark it. And I believed that the only thing I had set was in my BIOS in terms of overclocking. And I still to this day think that that's the case, but something was applied in there. And when I went into it, I'm actually trying to boot the Intel Extreme Tuning Utility right now, because I feel like I need to see this and remember what. So I think some type of tune or quote overclock was applied, but it was it was whatever was part of this app, and there was some type of throttle that it was hitting, and I think it had something to do with a current throttling or something, basically something related to power. But I didn't know why, and I couldn't figure it out for the life of me. But basically by going in and deleting all of the profiles in the Intel Extreme Tuning Utility and it being stock there, boom, gone. I had no discernible lag or bogged down computer anymore. And I, for the life of me, still can't figure out what about one of these latest updates changed anything in how any of these things interacted with each other. And that's the whole reason that I went even into the background and talking about old computers and stuff. I've been around computers and different operating systems and different hardware, and I've diagnosed things numerous times, and I haven't in a long time come across, like I've had problems with machines, but like they've overall still ran okay. Definitely even my main recording computer, I've had times where stuff's gone. Sometimes it was slow, or I wasn't getting the frame rate I expected, all of that stuff. I think we all do sometimes, we're running different mods, all that stuff. But this was, ultimately something that just dragged my computer down to a halt, like a screeching halt, and I couldn't figure it out for the life of me. Ultimately I did. Ultimately, this is a good story, but it took me 30 minutes to tell it because it was just a lot of BS. And I hope that this was worth the listen. I don't know if it was, and I apologize if it wasn't. Ultimately, though, I just want to say, keep your drives and keep on top of, definitely if you're running a PC, and if that PC is not only your gaming PC, but also a work PC or what have you, keep on top of it in terms of just the things that are running on it and the things that are all linked together. And definitely in this age where everything is its own gaming, the case has software, right? My NZXT case has software, as well as the motherboard, and then the graphics card, and then the SSD, and everything kind of has also now a software level application. Definitely if you want it to perform even remotely better than it is stock, then you got to deal with this kind of thing sometimes. But like I said, I still don't ultimately know what changed about how whatever was in the Intel tuning utility and then what was in my BIOS. I don't know ultimately what conflicted at the end of the day to cause something like this to happen. I mean, I do know now that it was something in the Intel Extreme tuning utility, but it was not something that I believed that I set, or, I'm not going for these. I'm actually air cooled. My CPU processor is air cooled and not, it's, a tall, the tower cooler, from Noctua. So it's a good cooler, but it's not air cooled. Or it is air cooled. I'm sorry. So I'm not over here overclocking my CPU by a bunch, or even, asking a lot more power out of it or anything. I'm running it within the limits of what it's kind of overclocked by at the factory. So I'm not doing anything that's like fringe case, and I wasn't doing anything really that I thought, or at least I thought, I guess Intel Extreme Utility had something else to say about it. So I hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble about computers for 30 minutes. I do apologize if this was boring. But it was also kind of a reason that I haven't been working on anything. I wanted to put out actually videos this weekend. I wanted to work on some different stuff for like Instagram Reels and stuff. But ultimately I could not, and only, resolved the issue today. So hopefully I'll be back to semi-normal as much as it is for me, content creation in this next week, or in the week that we're in now. Yeah. Hope you enjoyed this weird tech talk. Thanks for coming to my tech talk. Keep your computers healthy. Use, an antivirus, or use Windows Defender. Ultimately, Windows gets, I know I'm even, dogging on Windows a lot here, because whatever this update did, something changed right at a low level. And I know that, some of that was with the security of drives. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with the BIOS and whatever update they needed to do to make sure that we're not getting ransomware attacks on certain drives and all that stuff. So great job, Windows, for that. Boo Windows for whatever, cumulative package update or whatever you gave me over the last week that broke my computer. At least it made it run like molasses, because whatever you did made stuff conflict between the software level and the hardware level kind of stuff. Cool. But yeah, run Windows Defender. Take, certain precautions, backup stuff that you wouldn't otherwise be able to replace. I mean that physically as well as digitally. And I hope you guys have a good rest of the week. I hope to have videos out here for you soon. And let me know if you want weird little talks like this in the future. Hopefully they'll be a little less tech filled and a little less of the negative end of the spectrum in terms of, troubleshooting, because troubleshooting is not fun for a lot of people. I enjoy some of the aspects of it, obviously, or I wouldn't be talking about it for over 30 minutes. But ultimately, when it breaks it breaks everything. It breaks you creatively, because I want, when I'm in the mood to create, I'm in the mood to create. When I have to then, troubleshoot for 2 days, not so great. Not so great. All right, guys. See ya.